Chapter 5, The Black Cat. In autumn, the temperature is pleasant but the weather is erratic, when the sun is light, when it rains heavily. Anu has a sharp headache this morning. She has been sleeping all day, only now is she a little more alert. Just lying in bed all day, she felt cramped, so she lazily stood up, opened the door, and walked towards the ancestral church behind the main house. After stepping outside all day, Anu breathed deeply, feeling the autumn air. As a habit, she glanced around as she walked as if she was on guard for something. Entering the ancestral temple, she relaxed, lit incense sticks for the deceased, and then maintained the kneeling position in front of the altar for a long time. This space, the scent of smoke, and the souls of her loved ones made her feel strangely reassured. If possible, she doesn't want to leave here. Suddenly I heard the sound of rain tapping on the roof. Outside, lightning streaked across the sky. She stood up, suddenly realizing that the incense she had just burned for her mother had gone out. Probably because of the cold wind that just blew through. Anu lit the fire, reburned the incense, clasped her hands, and prayed a few words. Suddenly, a stream of cold air ran from my heart to the top of my head. It felt like a pair of eyes were on me. Her hand lowered and clenched into a fist. She swallowed her saliva and slowly turned her back. The scene before her eyes made her tremble. Under the weak candlelight, a rough black mass had been standing in the corner of the room for some time. When she caught a glimpse of the black fluff, Anu immediately thought of the person's head. With her hands on the altar to avoid falling, no words could describe Anu's fear at this moment. The head wiggled and began to move through the dim candlelight, towards her. Anu's throat turned to stone, unable to utter a weak cry for help. The head seemed to be gaining momentum, jumping towards Anu. Her fear reached its peak, she instinctively hugged her head. This sound, the heartbeat returned to normal. As if she had regained consciousness, Anu took a long breath and reached out to touch the little cat's head. It's true that the soul is broken with divinity, from a black cat to a human head. If she wasn't mistaken, it was a stray cat, coming to her house to look for food, but her father sent someone to chase it away. He said, "The black cat is the messenger of hell. Wherever he goes, he brings bad luck. Is the house not full of misfortunes yet, so why would he harbor this devil in the house? But it's so cute." The warmth from its fur made her hands less cold, seemingly helping her blood circulate better. She picked it up, and walked back through the rain to the house, passing by a resident on night patrol. Opening the door, the smell of herbal essential oils brought a feeling of relaxation. Anu got some food for the cat, and then happily watched it eat. In the middle of the night, the cat climbed onto the chair, curled up, his eyes half closed. Anu lightly punched both shoulders, climbed into bed, and covered herself with the blanket, but because she had been lying all day, she did not feel sleepy. Her eyes were only half closed, looking blankly at the ceiling. The last time she went to the doctor told her that she was suffering from excessive stress, combined with severe physical weakness. If she did not take care of her health, her life could very well be in danger. But living in this situation, who else is in the mood to take care of their health? Suddenly, she felt soft and warm in her legs. Is it a cat that searches for human breath in the middle of the night and crawls under the blanket to rub her legs? Anu laughed softly, the corners of her eyes curled up. Feeling the cotton ball crawling up her leg to her stomach, she immediately lifted the blanket, planning to hug it to sleep tonight. The screams on the floor made Anu's hands stiffen. She trembled, tilted her head, and looked back. The cat stood motionless, its eyes bright like stars, even more magical under the nightlight. Its eyes were glued to her body, more precisely, the thing lying on her stomach. Summoning all the courage in her life, Anu slowly raised the blanket higher and immediately froze. What caught my eye was a grey human head, drenched in blood, with mucus flowing from the eyes and ears. The face was wrinkled and deformed, so it was impossible to recognize who it was. Anu was so scared that her whole body was as stiff as a stone. Even if she wanted to scream, she couldn't. The head crawled up, staring at her, its eyes were red, with blood flowing out. The strong fishy smell wafted into Anu's nose. The head's lips moved as if it wanted to say something but couldn't. Then, it opened its mouth and spit fresh blood onto Anu's body. The liquid soaked her shirt. Anu cried out in pain, threw both the blanket and her head to the ground, and rushed out. It rained heavily, and the rainwater soaked into Anu's clothes. She was cold, her eyes were blurred. She ran to Mr. Manish's house and called for help. Suddenly, in the distance, there was a light floating like a ghost moving towards Anu. She stopped, trembling and taking a step back. Is that Miss Anu? A woman's voice mixed with the sound of falling rain. It's a resident on night patrol. It's like being about to drown but finding a lifeline. Anu ran over, grabbed the maid, and asked for help, unable to speak. There is a ghost. There is a ghost in my room. Yes, Miss Anu is coming with me. Follow me. The lamp was raised, and the person's face appeared clearly under the dim light. Her face was pale, her hair was matted with rainwater, and blood flowed from her eyes, nose, and mouth. Anu's arms and legs fell off. Immediately, a cold hand grabbed her neck and squeezed. Anu rolled her eyes, opened her mouth, and tried to take in mouthfuls of air. The rain fell torrentially, the barbaric laughter made her ears ring. Anu weakly resisted, and finally, her hands hung down helplessly. Will she die? Accept that, because life is not fun anyway. Since she was born she has always suffered. The only sadness is that she has tried her best to live until today, but still has to receive a bitter end. The moment she lost consciousness, Anu did not recognize the glowing locket necklace, which contained the talisman that Shailesh had given her. Mistress! Mistress! Please wake up! Being shaken hard, Anu opened her eyes, bent down, and coughed. The female servant kept patting her on the back. Seeing the flashlight shining at her, Anu quickly crawled back, keeping a safe distance from her. Mistress? The maid was bewildered, not understanding anything. What's wrong with you? Miss. Anu observed the person across from her, gulping slightly. Why are you here? I went on night duty as scheduled and saw you lying on the ground, your whole body soaked, so I quickly called you up. Anu put her hand on her neck, so the person she met just now was. Anu's heart was beating wildly, her whole body was cold, and her arms hugged her body, trembling. The maid quickly helped her into the room, turned on the heater, and helped her dry her body. But Anu doesn't seem to calm down. When dawn first arose, the sky was still competing for darkness and light. The maid is busy preparing breakfast. Mrs. Anu woke up, changed into dark brown clothes, brought a small bag, got in the car to go to Vanan Pagoda, about 10 kilometers from her home. She sat in the back seat. The car was driving on the highway, when she saw a girl standing on the side of the road. The girl has long, hanging hair, covering part of her face. The dress is pure white as snow. Her thin, pale hand reached out, as if she wanted to catch a ride. Madam, someone is asking for a ride, do we need to stop the car? The driver slowed down and approached the young girl. No need. Ms. Anu was decisive. The kind of girl who wanders around this deserted street early in the morning is probably not a good type. Best not to get involved. The car continued to roll, the scene shifting through the window. The driver talked non-stop, saying that this Vanan Pagoda was famous in the area. Pray for yourself, pray for fame, pray for wealth, pray for peace, just be sincere and it will be fulfilled. Mrs. Anu frowned, none of her maids were so talkative. Mr. Manish just hired? Why didn't I know? Concentrate on driving. Why are you so talkative? Yes. But dear lady, if this time your prayer for peace is successful, you must definitely return the offerings to the temple. Madam, do you think I'm right? If you borrow, you have to pay it back. If you take something, you have to give it back. I already know, I don't need you to talk too much. Mrs. Anu was grumpy. Sitting with her feet up on a chair, arms crossed, looking at the street. Suddenly, passing through her eyes, that white dress girl with her head down appeared again. Mrs. Anu was startled and quickly turned around to look, but there was no one left. However, at a junction, that image appeared again. It was like she was entering a loop with no way out. Hey, did you see anything? That girl just now. Her voice trembled, clearly frightened. As if he didn't hear, the driver started blabbing about Vanan Pagoda again. He repeated what he had just said, without a single word being wrong. The car accelerated and drove away at a terrifying speed. Madam, do you think I'm right? If you borrow, you have to pay it back. If you take something, you have to give it back, give it back. She was horrified, her eyes coincidentally landed on the rearview mirror. The whole body felt like it was falling apart. A young woman in a white dress stained with dirt and blood was sitting next to her, her hand on her neck, constantly vomiting blood from her mouth. Mrs. Anu trembled and put her hand on her neck, but couldn't feel anything. But she still had difficulty breathing, and she felt like the ghostly thing's cold breath was blowing into one of her ears. "If you take something, you have to give it back, give it back, give it back. Give it back." The driver screamed and turned around. What caught Miss Anu's eye was a rotten face, crawling with maggots. She was terrified, her eyes widened, she couldn't move her eyes, she was forced to look straight at him. Suddenly, that person was speechless, unable to say anything clearly. That person's mouth suddenly opened wide, and a mouthful of fresh blood spilled out. No tongue. That was the last thought that came to her mind before her ears were ringing with the loud honking of truck horns.